Hey everyone, my name is Nathan, and welcome to Alfred Hitchcock Month. Today I'm talking about the movie Rope. This is one of Alfred Hitchcock's most unique movies in that it's one of two movies that he really took the time with on long shots. The other movie was Under Capricorn. The difference between Under Capricorn and Rope is that Rope is actually good. But in all honesty, Rope is one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movies. If I were to create an Alfred Hitchcock starter pack for what you should watch to really get to know him and his filmography, this would absolutely be in it because he checks off all the boxes here. It was the first movie that James Stewart collaborated with Alfred Hitchcock on. There would be 3 more movies they collaborated together with. When you talk about Alfred Hitchcock's greatest movies, usually the conversation consists of Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, The Birds. I would put Rope in that conversation and even rank it above some of the ones I just mentioned. Now, if you weren't aware, Rope was filmed in only 10 shots, if you don't count the establishing shot, that is. This is very crucial to the story. It's not just some sort of gimmick. It actually deals with a story in that it is real time, that you are following the characters, their actions. You're not trying to solve who the murderer is. It's not a mystery movie. You know exactly who the murderer is. You're more so watching the movie to see if the murderers get away with the action, because the murder happens in less than 5 minutes. The movie begins, and right when you're in the apartment, you see the murder taking place. But it's what happens after the murder, whether or not they can lie themselves out of the crime. That's really where the suspense that Alfred Hitchcock creates comes from, if they are going to get away with it or not. So Rope begins with the establishing shot. There's joyful music playing, you're looking out onto a city, you see people walking, and then it cuts to the first shot, which is the murder taking place. Now, I will say, if you haven't seen Rope, there will be spoilers in this video. So I highly suggest that you watch the movie and then come back after you've seen it to watch this video. So let's talk about each shot.
Don't want to leave our guest of honor alone during supper.
The first shot of Rope is actually one of the longest shots in the entire movie. And for this, it pulls the audience in right away. I know that I've seen this movie several times, but every time I'm watching it, I know that there are so few shots, and so I'm looking for that moment where it cuts to the next scene. This is where you meet the 2 antagonists, John Dall and Farley Granger, which both do an amazing job here. Farley Granger is the one that's still not completely convinced that what they're doing is justified, whereas John Dall is the one that's justifying everything. He's saying, we have this right to get away with murder, and he's the one that really stretches his luck as the runtime goes throughout, and that's a big thing that I like about his character and Farley Granger's character. I like that they're 2 very separate personality types, yet they come together to complete the murder. This opening shot is interesting because you get to know the characters fast, you know that the murder has already happened, and it ends with them making a joke about it. Not only do they murder someone, but they hide him in a chest, they decorate the chest, and then they serve dinner on it. That's screaming Alfred Hitchcock humor. The tension from 1 to 2, though, is very crucial. Let's move on to the second shot. You zoom into a suit coat, and that trick is actually used a few more times.
Rupert's coming? Oh, yes, I thought I told you.
Oh, I must say I did enjoy
No,
working for Mr.
you
Goodell.
Making a movie like this, such an ambitious job, this wasn't an easy task. I mean, not only do you have to make sure that the actors know their lines and that they don't mess up on their cues and whatnot, but you also have to place the cameras so strategically, because the cameras aren't just staying in place. They're following the characters, they're moving around. They have to choreograph the entire movie to make sure that people aren't stepping on each other's toes, literally. But my favorite part of shot number 2 is probably when Brandon puts the rope away. There's just something so satisfying about watching him drop the rope into the drawer through the swinging door. That goes again with what I was talking about, with how everything has to be so strategically planned that the camera has to make sure that they're focusing on Brandon and that they're showing him, and he has to drop it at a moment where the door is swinging so it perfectly is captured on film.
Then you'd like David to walk in.
Oh, no, that'd be too much of a shock.
Something that stands out to me in shot 3 is the conversation that's taking place. I mean, we're just watching a party happen in real time, and it's just entertaining. You wouldn't think it would be because you're just watching people talk, but the things that they talk about, the interactions, I kind of touched on this earlier, but a big strength of Rope is how it has the ability to show you real time, but also make you feel like time's moving by fast. I mean, it never feels drawn out or anything like that. I especially like it when Mrs. Atwater mistakes Kenneth for David, and right away Philip breaks his glass. And with shot 4, James Stewart is officially in the movie. It takes a long time for him to enter the movie, and this was something that he later complained about. This was actually his least favorite Hitchcock collaboration because he felt like he wasn't too much like the character, and he also didn't like that he came into the movie so late. Coming from someone whose favorite actor of all time is James Stewart, his late appearance doesn't really bother me. I think the movie does such a good job at intriguing you and getting you attached to the plot line and the suspense that you kind of forget that James Stewart is even going to show up, period. He shows up about 28 minutes into the movie, which is a long time, especially for a short movie like this. But even if he were to show up an hour into the movie, he would still be the star. It's so funny to see how confident Brandon is before Rupert arrives to the party, and then right when they start talking, Brandon starts stuttering. As the conversations go on, I love that David keeps getting brought up. There's a moment during the shot that I can't bypass. It's when Mrs. Atwater, Janet, and Rupert are all talking. The movie that they're talking about sounds exactly like it's Notorious, which is incredibly meta of Alfred Hitchcock.
In another moment, you might have been strangling each other instead of a chicken.
Shot 5 has a hard cut to James Stewart's reaction, and man do I love his reaction. He sees that Philip is a little bit too wound up from the chicken story, which obviously is raising some concerns. This is one of the first moments in the movie that he's picking up on something unusual about the party.
Murder is, or should be, an art. Not one of the 7 lively, perhaps, but an art nevertheless.
What follows is the first public discussion over murder, and it's just pure Hitchcock, the conversation that goes on. Talking about murder is like a perfect ingredient for any of his movies.
Of course, unless there's the apple. Oh, Mary, do you ever think of anything but books?
Oh, very well.
Shot 6 has a great interaction between Rupert and Philip. Philip is at the piano playing. He's really just trying to distance himself from Rupert because he's so scared to talk to him about anything for that matter.
I'm in quite an embarrassing position.
How do you mean?
Well, I seem to be the only one having a good time.
There are so many little things that add to the suspense and really make this shot memorable for me. The ticking of the metronome, Rupert catching on to Philip's lies, the soft piano music playing, the subtle conversation that's happening between the two characters. And to close it off, a pile of books introduced into the scene, tied up with a rope. Rupert notices Philip's obvious, alarming reaction and is also concerned.
But don't you think it would help if we found out where he was?
I suppose so.
Now, shot number 7 is where Hitchcock really shines as the master of suspense. He's very good at showing and not telling. In this particular shot, Mrs. Wilson is cleaning off the table as conversations take place in the background. Oddly enough, we're hoping that she doesn't get to the chest and open it up because then she'll see the dead body. But she's getting very close to it, and so we're getting more and more at the edge of our seat, hoping that she doesn't make it. It's because Alfred Hitchcock knows that we know that the body is hidden in there. It's the difference between suspense and a surprise. If the movie just started off with a party and skipped the murder scene and then Mrs. Wilson opened up the chest and saw the dead body, that would be very surprising and shocking to the viewers. But because we know that the body is in the chest, it's very suspenseful. I really like the moment where they're talking about calling the police because they're starting to get concerned, and the camera pans over to Philip's reaction. It then shows Rupert's reaction to Philip's reaction. It's just so fun to watch Rupert slowly catch on to the murder. Him accidentally receiving David's hat as he leaves the party is absolute gold. I love how defeated he is when he leaves because he knows that his suspicion is true and he does not want it to be true. He's scared, he's concerned, and he doesn't know what to do next. You can tell all of that just in James Stewart's acting. He doesn't have to say anything. There doesn't have to be some sort of cheesy voiceover like, "It was then I knew, they killed David." That would be awful, first off. It's all in his acting and his defeated manner when he departs that it tells us everything.
Brandon, it's Rupert.
What?
He wants to come up. He says he left a cigarette case here. He wants to come up.
Well, let him come.
Shot 8 is really exciting because we now know that Rupert knows that Brandon and Philip were behind the murder of David. But now it's just about Rupert finding out what exactly they did. I love when he enters the scene again. Rupert comes into the room and he's looking for an excuse to stay. He plants a cigarette case, but before he does so, he's looking around, trying to think of any excuse he can make for being in that room. I love his acting here. The eye movements he makes act and speak so many words. I also can't help but laugh when Rupert is sitting down and Brandon and Philip are just standing, hovering over him, like not being obvious at all, right?
I don't want to, but I'm gonna look inside that chest.
Now, there's a whole entire sequence that makes shot number 9 really good, and it starts with Rupert acknowledging that there's a gun in Brandon's pocket. After that, he reveals the rope just to get a reaction, just to see what they do, and through it all, he remains very calm and collected. I touched on Farley Granger's nervous acting earlier and how I think it works really well here. One particular thing I really like about this shot is how he's been slowly kind of losing it, and this is the shot where he just breaks, where he's had enough, he starts yelling, he's basically next to confessing. It's very intense, and I think he does an amazing job at it. John Dall is amazing as well at being the most punchable guy in the room. Like, he really sells the role of being the cocky person who he knows that what he's doing is amazing because he's doing it. Even when Rupert is basically 99% sure that they murdered David, he's still not confessing it. It's not until he says that he's going to check the chest even though he doesn't want to. And that's when Brandon basically gives in and says, "Go ahead, check it. I hope you're satisfied with what you find."
Oh, no.
The transition from shot 9 to shot 10 might be my favorite of the whole entire movie. Shot 9 closes with James Stewart opening the chest, and shot 10 begins zooming out and showing James Stewart's reaction to looking into the chest. Shot 10 is arguably the best sequence of the entire movie. James Stewart's monologue is so powerful. In fact, it's even chilling. No one could deliver it the way that James Stewart delivers it in this scene. In a way, it kind of feels like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but 9 years later. His speech is just about as powerful as Mr. Smith's 23-hour filibuster. The red and green lights accompany it perfectly. And I really like the closing of this shot and of the movie. How the three of them are just standing there. Philip goes to play the piano, Brandon pours himself a drink, and Rupert just waits for help to come. It's so simple, yet it's such a good conclusion. Rope is not even an hour and a half. It's a very short movie running at just over 80 minutes long, but it's one of my favorite Hitchcock movies and one of my favorite movies of all time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie Rope. Leave your comments down below as always, and stay tuned for August 13th, where I will have my complete ranking of Alfred Hitchcock's filmography out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great day.